Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to proceedings in Public Service Commission case number 14-M-0183. This case involves a petition to the Commission of Comcast Corporation and Time Warner Cable, Inc., seeking approval under the Public Service Law for the transfer of certain Time Warner cable telephone systems, cable systems, franchises, and assets to Comcast. A transaction that is commonly referred to as the Comcast-Time Warner merger. The proceeding tonight is divided into two parts. First, we have an information forum in which Representative Comcast will explain their proposal. This will be followed by 4 individuals representing various organizations who will discuss some of the public interest issues involved, or they believe are involved in the transaction. My name is David Prestemon. I'm an administrative law judge for the Department of Public Service. With me at the dais here today are Audrey Zibelman, Chair of the Public Service Commission, Diane Berman, Commissioner. The two of them are 2 of the 5 commissioners who will be ultimately making the decision in this case. Also with me are Chad Hume, who is the Director of the Department's Office of Telecommunications, and Peter McGowan, who is Chief Policy Advisor to the Commission. Following the public statement or the information forum, there may be some questions from the commissioners and the staff here. Following the informational forum, we will move immediately to a public statement hearing. The purpose of the public statement hearing is to allow members of the public to express their views on this proposed transaction live and in person, and their comments will be transcribed, be included in the transcript that will be before the commission as part of the record in this case. You should know that you do not have to speak here in order to have your comments heard by the commission. The commission accepts comments directly through its website by going to the website and going to the case number. You can enter your comments directly there. You can also make comments by sending an email to the commission's secretary, by calling the commission's hotline, or sending a regular old letter. If you want instructions on how to do that, or if there's someone who couldn't be here that you think might want to comment, we have a fact sheet here at the table. You can pick it up there that explains how you can submit your comments. With that, I think we can begin with the informational forum. Speaking for Comcast is Mr. Mark Reilly. He's a Senior Vice President for Government and Regulatory Affairs for Comcast Cable.
Thank you, Judge Prestemon, Chair Zibelman, Commissioner Berman, Mr. McGowan, Mr. Hume. My name is Mark Reilly, and I'm Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for the Northeast Division of Comcast. Thank you for this opportunity to appear before you and the people of New York to discuss the proposed transaction between Comcast and Time Warner Cable. The transaction will create a new world-class communications media and technology company which will deliver real benefits to consumers, businesses, and public institutions in the state of New York. Comcast is already a good corporate citizen here in New York. Since acquiring NBC Universal in 2011, Comcast has added nearly 2,000 new jobs and invested over $400 million in the state. NBC Universal moved The Tonight Show and production studios for Sprout, America's Got Talent, and other popular NBC networks and shows back to New York. Comcast Ventures, the innovation investment arm of Comcast, has opened centers in Silicon Valley and here in New York, where we partner and invest in startups to launch new businesses that will develop new technology products and services and create jobs. And Comcast offers competitive voice, video, and internet services to residential and business customers in 10 New York communities within Dutchess, Putnam, Washington, and Westchester counties. Through the transaction with Time Warner Cable, Comcast will significantly expand its presence and investment in the state, making next-generation video, voice, and broadband services available to millions of New Yorkers. As a recognized industry leader with solid financial capabilities and technological expertise, Comcast will deliver better, more reliable services that improve the quality of life of New Yorkers. We will also continue to work with the Commission and Department of Public Service staff to help ensure that the transition is seamless. Since many New Yorkers are relatively unfamiliar with Comcast, I want to briefly describe some of the innovative and improved services Comcast makes available to its customers, and how the transaction will bring these same services and other significant benefits to consumers in New York. Although I recognize that the Commission's jurisdiction is primarily over video and voice matters, I will also touch on the faster and more reliable broadband services that Comcast provides, as well as Comcast's binding commitment to an open internet. For residential customers, Comcast will invest heavily to upgrade Time Warner cable systems across New York and transition them to all digital more quickly than Time Warner could do on its own. Comcast has already transitioned its systems to all digital and is committed to investing more than $3 billion in further upgrades to our network over the next 3 years. Comcast has the expertise and financial resources to accelerate the conversion to all digital for Time Warner cable systems throughout the state of New York and across the country. As Comcast customers have already experienced, all digital systems will allow us to deliver next-generation advanced video and voice services, more programming choices, faster internet speeds, and significantly improved network performance, reliability, and security. More specifically, we will improve customer experiences for Time Warner Cable video subscribers in several ways. Comcast's revolutionary X1 operating platform provides unmatched interactive TV functionality. Our live TV streaming feature allows X1 customers to stream practically their entire cable channel lineup, including must-carry stations as well as PEG channels, to computers and mobile devices throughout the home. Xfinity On Demand includes approximately 50,000 programming choices, more than double that of Time Warner Cable. It features the most current TV shows and movies. These selections are available on and accessible on multiple devices, and over 80% are free of charge. We also offer an industry-leading TV Everywhere experience with access to more than 300,000 streaming choices, including over 5 live TV channels. And our recently launched Xfinity TV online store allows customers to access new movies and TV shows weeks before they're available on Blu-ray or DVD. The transaction will also combine the best aspects of the two companies' existing voice products, creating best-in-class voice services that will be available to millions of New Yorkers. These offerings will include a host of innovative features, including caller ID over multiple devices and our new Voice to Go service that allows customers to place calls over a Wi-Fi or data connection from their Comcast assigned telephone numbers. And we will offer multiple international calling options so customers can reach more countries at very competitive rates. Comcast is also deeply committed to providing accessible solutions to consumers with disabilities. Our goal is a smart home for everyone, where accessibility is enabled across products and services regardless of platform. For example, we're leveraging that same X1 platform, which is a cloud-based platform, to deliver the first talking guide in the industry. The X1 remote controls include soft keys that disabled customers can configure for quick and easy access to the talking guide, closed captioning, video description, as well as other features. We've also deployed a readable voicemail service so deaf and hearing impaired customers can access voicemail and convert that voicemail audio into text. And our Xfinity Connect mobile app is screen reader enabled so blind and low vision users can access email, text, and other online services on tablets and smartphones. Comcast also has a dedicated customer support team in our new Accessibility Center of Excellence. We're committed to extending the very best accessibility features and support services, including those developed by Time Warner Cable, across the combined company's footprint. Comcast recognizes that improving customer service is another critical issue. Comcast has invested billions of dollars in network infrastructure, greatly improving service reliability and reducing trouble calls. We will do the same here in New York. We are also deploying innovative products and features to make it easier and more convenient for customers to interact with us. We offer 1 to 2 hour service appointment windows, including evenings and weekends, and we're meeting these appointments 97% of the time. For those of you who didn't catch my comments the first time, they are being repeated for you. We offer more self-installation options so customers can install and activate services without a service call. And we've given customers access to the same diagnostic tools used by our customer care agents. And now more than 40% of our customers are using these options to their benefit so that they're able to control their products and services on their own schedule. We've given our customers the ability to manage their accounts online, on their mobile devices, and even on their TV screens. These tools have proven highly popular, and we expect by the end of this year that more than half of our customers will be using them to directly manage their accounts. And we've made our billing practices more transparent and customer-friendly. Although there is still progress to be made, these efforts are making a positive difference and beginning to change some of the lagging perceptions in the marketplace. Since 2010, Comcast has improved its J.D. Power overall satisfaction score by more than any other video or broadband provider in the industry. We will bring this same commitment to improve customer service to consumers here in New York. For business customers, the combination of Comcast and Time Warner Cable will create a stronger, more cost-efficient provider for New York businesses of all sizes. Comcast has helped thousands of mom-and-pop businesses from barbershops to delis lower their monthly voice and data costs. This has enabled these small businesses to grow and add employees. And where Comcast has made inroads to the business market, other providers have responded by lowering their prices and improving their services. The transaction will enable Comcast to combine the best of its business offerings with those of Time Warner Cable, better positioning the combined company to serve more small businesses in New York, including some additional New York communities where Comcast will be acquiring systems from Charter Communications in related transactions. In addition, by expanding our geographic reach and bringing these operations under the management of one company, we will be able to offer regional and larger businesses one-stop shopping for seamless lower-cost voice and data services. For example, this will allow us to compete more effectively for business customers that are headquartered in New York City with locations around the state, rather than having to deal with two companies with different products and offerings. These businesses will now be able to receive best-in-class services from a single provider at multiple locations, not only in New York, but in adjacent states as well, currently served by Comcast. This will bring greater competition to the marketplace that is still heavily dominated by other providers and help drive small and medium business growth and economic development throughout the state. The greater geographic reach and economies of scale resulting from the transaction will also enable Comcast to offer expanded wholesale service to mobile operators in the state, helping those mobile operators provide greater bandwidth and lower cost services to their wireless customers in New York. Greater competition for these various business services, along with substantial improvements to video and voice services for residential customers that I previously described, will enhance economic welfare and benefit in New York and for New York consumers. Beyond improved performance and reliability for video and voice services, the transaction will also significantly improve customer experiences for broadband services. In existing Comcast systems, we have increased speeds 13 times in the last 12 years. We offer residential broadband speeds of up to 505 megabits per second, By contrast, Time Warner Cable has not yet transitioned the majority of its systems in New York to all digital, and they offer speeds of up to only 100 megabits per second in limited areas. And as to the issue of speed, the FCC released yesterday its Measuring Broadband in America report, which found again that Comcast delivers more than its advertised speeds every hour of the day, even in peak hours in the evening. Comcast has deployed approximately 8 million advanced Wi-Fi gateways in the home, giving our customers the nation's fastest wireless speeds and excellent performance over their residential wireless networks. And we now have 3 million public Wi-Fi hotspots across the country, with plans to reach 8 million by the end of the year. This will allow our customers to use their Xfinity internet service on the go in millions of locations across the country. Time Warner Cable only recently began deploying advanced Wi-Fi gateways in its customers' homes, and compared to Comcast's 3 million Wi-Fi hotspots, Time Warner Cable has deployed approximately 29,000. In short, approval of the transaction will not only bring improved, more reliable internet service at home, but also expanded internet access on the go. And because Comcast is the only ISP in the United States that has agreed to be legally bound by the FCC's original open internet rules, the transaction will also extend those protections to Time Warner Cable customers. Comcast customers have responded very favorably to our industry-leading internet offerings, as well as our next-generation video and voice products that I previously described. So much so that our triple play package with all three services is now our most popular offering, and more than 2/3 of all of our customers across the country prefer 2 to 3 product bundles to a standalone service of cable, voice, or broadband service. In addition, through our highly acclaimed Internet Essentials program, Comcast has made important progress in closing the broadband adoption gap for low-income families with a special focus on school-age children. Internet Essentials provides low-income households with broadband of up to 5 megabits per second for $9.95 a month, the option to purchase an internet-ready computer for under $150, and multiple options for accessing free digital literacy training in print, online, and in person. Comcast has already connected over 1.2 million low-income Americans to the internet, more than any program of its kind by any company anywhere in the United States. The transaction will expand that program to low-income students and families throughout the Time Warner footprint, including here in New York. The transaction offers other important public benefits too. For example, Comcast will extend its industry-leading diversity programs and unique external Joint Diversity Advisory Council to the acquired Time Warner Cable systems, bringing greater diversity in governance, employment, suppliers, programming, and community investment. Comcast will similarly extend public interest commitments from the NBC Universal transaction, such as making local, diverse, and children's programming available on various platforms, such as video on demand and TV everywhere. Comcast also has a proven commitment to local communities and organizations. Since 2001, Comcast has invested over $3.2 billion in cash and in-kind contributions supporting local nonprofit organizations and other charitable partners. Beyond financial gifts, Comcast shares its greatest resource, its people, in giving back to local communities. Last year, our employees and their families gave back in a day of service called Comcast Cares Day, and they contributed in one day more than 500 million hours of 500,000 hours of service to improve schools, parks, senior centers, and other vital community organizations. On top of all of these significant benefits, and contrary to what some critics say about reduced choice for consumers, this transaction does not take away a choice for video, voice, or broadband for New Yorkers. Instead, this transaction takes one of the choices that New Yorkers have today and transforms it. It transforms that choice into a better video provider, transforms that choice into a more robust IP-based voice provider. It transforms that choice into a faster, more innovative broadband provider. In short, one of the choices you have today becomes a better choice tomorrow. In closing, upon approval of this transaction, New Yorkers can expect to benefit from next-generation video technologies with more programming choices at home and on the go, best-in-class voice products, enhanced competition for advanced business and wireless backhaul services, and faster, more reliable, and more secure internet services. A commitment to greater broadband adoption, diversity, accessibility, and investment in local communities, and a laser-like focus on improving customer service. As Comcast's record from prior transactions demonstrates, we are a company that not only keeps but often over-delivers on our promises. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Our next speaker is Delara Derakhshani. Ms. Derakhshani serves as the Policy Counsel in the Washington office of the Consumers Union, where she is the lead advocate for the organization's telecommunications, media, and privacy efforts.
Thank you all so much for having me here today. My name is Delara Derakhshani, and I serve as Policy Counsel for Consumers Union, the advocacy arm of Consumer Reports magazine. Consumer Reports is the largest independent product testing organization with a mission to work for a fair, just, and safe marketplace. In addition to our testing and national survey capabilities, we rate thousands of products and services each year for more than 8 million subscribers. And as part of our advocacy efforts, we engage in a dialogue with consumers and work to protect them against abusive practices in the marketplace. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today. This proposed merger is not in the public interest. Comcast and Time Warner have made a number of promises about how this deal will benefit consumers. But the reality is that this deal would give Comcast enormous power and unprecedented dominance in the marketplace. If the merger is approved, the company will control over 2/3 of all cable television customers and nearly 40% of all high-speed internet customers in the United States. The result would be higher prices, fewer choices, and worse customer service for New Yorkers and for consumers all across the nation. To put it simply, this deal should be rejected. Consumers across the nation are already riddled with price hikes and lousy customer service. Each year, the cost of cable continues to rise sharply, according to the FCC's figures, many times the rate of inflation. And many consumers find themselves having to buy larger and larger packages of expensive cable programming just to get access to some of the programming that they truly want. And in New York, the story is no different. According to recent press reports, the cost of standard cable package, the required monthly rate to rent a set-top box in order to get your cable to work, and the cost of internet service all continue to rise in New York. And at the same time, despite the rising prices, consumers nationwide have told us that they are dissatisfied with the service that they're receiving from these two companies. According to the latest reader survey by Consumer Reports, Comcast and Time Warner Cable are among the worst companies in customer satisfaction for TV service. Comcast ranked 15th among 17 television service providers included in the ratings and earned particularly low remarks for value for money and customer support. Time Warner Cable ranked 16th overall for television service, with particularly low ratings for value, reliability, and phone and online customer support. It's hard to see how combining these two companies that already have a poor track record with consumers would somehow improve the situation for customers here in New York or anywhere else. To the contrary, combining these two companies would give the merged entity an even larger national presence, more market power, and less of an incentive to address consumers' needs. I've just described to you an industry in which consumers are stuck with rising bills, limited in their choice of providers, have to pay monthly subscription fees for large packages of content, some of which they may not even want, and endure frustrating experiences with customer service. At Consumers Union, we've engaged in a dialogue with consumers who will be most impacted by this merger, and they've told us exactly how they feel. In April 2014, just recently, in a nationally representative survey, we found that most Americans are opposed to the proposed merger between Comcast and Time Warner Cable. Our poll showed that only 11% support this merger, while 56% oppose it, with another 32% with no opinion on the deal. Large majorities of consumers agree that this deal will hurt them by leading to higher prices, fewer choices, and reduced incentives to provide good customer service. Specifically, 74% believed there would be price hikes. 74% were concerned that smaller companies wouldn't be able to compete. And 2/3 believed that Comcast would have little incentive to improve customer service. Not only that, but more than half actually thought that customer service would get worse. Consumers were also skeptical about the benefits that would accrue to them in the deal. Only 16% believe that Comcast will pass along any proposed benefits or any efficiencies that may result from the deal, resulting in actual benefits to them. And only 12% of Americans overall believe that mergers like this are actually good for the economy. But furthermore, right here in New York, we've received hundreds of complaints, which are on file with our organization. I wanted to recount just a couple of them that I think really highlight the types of experiences and frustrations that consumers are experiencing. For example, Barbara P. from New York City, who pays $127 a month for Time Warner service, said, "To allow this merger to take place is to allow the lowest rated cable providers to merge. Let each company work on improving service to existing customers before even thinking about mergers." And Alfred W. of Brewster, New York, who's a Comcast customer, noted that every time he makes a complaint, it's met with efforts to upsell on equipment. He said, "The latest is that I was told that unless I upgrade, they won't come out to see me to tell me what's wrong, even though it's the same problem with their wiring that has occurred for about twice a year now for the last 10 years. And finally, one last example, Ted V. of Mendon, New York, is a Time Warner customer who pays $175 a month. And he expressed to us his feeling that the lack of competition in the Rochester, New York area, results in higher prices for broadband services that perform at lower speeds than in areas where there is actually competition. So before I conclude my remarks, I'd like to mention that our organization is also very concerned about the issue of net neutrality and maintaining an open internet. The concept that internet service providers should treat online content equally. The FCC is currently considering new net neutrality rules that may enable internet service providers to sell preferential access to content providers who are willing to pay for it. And this would give Comcast, especially after this merger, new power to play favorites among websites and services and to control the quality, speed, and availability of programming. This merger would only further increase the concerns we have about net neutrality. In conclusion, I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you before you today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Derakhshani. Our next speaker is Susan Lerner of Common Cause New York. Ms. Lerner is the Executive Director of Common Cause New York, has been an activist for over 30 years. She speaks and writes extensively on, among many other subjects, media and democracy issues.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Common Cause New York is a leading force in the battle for honest and accountable government, and Common Cause nationwide has a national media and democracy reform initiative, which is aimed at spotlighting and countering the growing political and economic power of the communications industry. Here in New York, we've taken active positions on telecommunications and other media matters, ranging from the Verizon Fios contract here in New York City, internet access in New York City parks, to oversight of cable franchise agreements, just among a few. We've worked with a broad range of groups throughout the state on media and telecom matters. And I'm very grateful to the Commission for holding this public forum and also for the opportunity to discuss the proposed Time Warner Cable merger, the Time Warner purchase by Comcast. At Common Cause, we're very grateful for the recent change in New York state law, which sets what we believe is an appropriate standard requiring that the proposed merger be in the public interest in order for it to be approved. We believe strongly, along with our coalition partners, Consumers Union, and several groups which are here today, that this proposed acquisition simply cannot meet that standard and should not be approved by the Public Service Commission. We're concerned with the negative impact which the formation of such a huge entity will have on what is the necessary vigorous marketplace of ideas that's essential for the well-functioning of our democratic system. The ability of a really colossal entity to play favorites, and unfortunately, the experience in other marketplaces and as a result of other mergers, leads us to conclude that Comcast, unlike its very smooth presentation here today, actually has predilection for playing favorites and for using its market power. The FCC has found that it has, in at least one instance, violated the merger conditions for the Comcast-NBC merger in a move having to do with its cable TV lineup, which negatively impacted its competitor Bloomberg TV, placing Bloomberg TV very high up in the lineup, keeping it out of the really popular area of the channel lineup in order to advantage its own business network subsidiary, MSNBC. And the FCC has ordered it to make a change in that regard. We believe that there are other anti-competitive practices which Comcast has used its market power to engage in. Comcast has set when it was forcing a data cap situation on its customers, it chose to exempt its own video on-demand services from the cap charge, from the cap that consumers were facing, but counted the downloads of its competitors towards that cap, what we believe is clearly an uncompetitive practice, anti-competitive practice, and we believe probably also violates the terms of the NBC-Comcast merger. Let's see. We're also concerned with the increased political power which an entity of this size and this degree of resources would have here in New York State. Telecom companies, Time Warner among them, are among the largest spenders on lobbying and significant campaign contributors. And in fact, last year, we at Common Cause New York we issued a report in our influential Moreland Mondays series where we suggested to the Moreland Commission on Corruption that they should look seriously at the political spending by the telecom industry because of the way in which we believe it influences public policy, often not to the public good. We can look at other jurisdictions to see the way in which Comcast behaves as a public citizen and the significant anti-regulatory, anti-consumer measures which it relentlessly pushes in states throughout the country, North Carolina and South Carolina being an example, recent example, where its efforts along with other industry giants to stop municipal broadband services was successful. And its continuing efforts, so far unsuccessful in Kansas and Utah this year, to stop municipalities from providing affordable access to broadband when they believe that their citizens would benefit from a municipal system. I'd also like to point out in terms of the competitive marketplace that it's very interesting that Univision recently has spoken out against this merger because it believes that it has been discriminated against, similarly to the way in which Bloomberg TV has been discriminated against by Comcast, which uses its market power. And finally, I'd like to Well, actually, not finally. I'd like to talk a bit about the business climate here in New York City and the investment which New York City and other areas of our state have made in fostering a climate for tech innovation and internet startups. Some of you may have seen an interesting map which appeared on the New York Times website in the last week or so that actually shows the various areas of the city in which you have clusters of tech startups, of which are an expanding number. And the city has invested quite a bit in encouraging tech startups with the idea of now fostering something called Silicon Alley here in New York City. And of course, you're familiar with the concept of the Tech Valley in the capital and surrounding regions. And Buffalo now has joined in and is trying to become a tech incubator as well. We are very much concerned about Comcast's pricing practices as far as broadband access is concerned for businesses and for others. We understand that Comcast has indicated that it will impose a regional pricing structure here, and many of the broadband services in other states are priced at a much higher price point than either freestanding broadband or packages here in New York State. This could have an immediate deleterious impact on the government policies which seek to encourage tech startups and entrepreneurship here in New York. And I apologize that there's a typo in my written testimony when I refer to 50% of the workplace being made up of freelancers and self-employed people. It's actually 30% made up of freelancers and self-employed. But I think we see it very, very directly here in New York City. And people who have the need for reliable, affordable, individual broadband, a graphics designer who works at home, a video editor who works out of their apartment, may not be in an area where you would expect to have a high-speed broadband. And they're probably not buying a business package, but they would be getting a residential package, now we believe most likely more highly priced by Time Warner, making it more difficult. 85% of the businesses in New York are small businesses. Many of them survive because of their access to the internet. Certainly, many small retailers find it absolutely essential to supplement their in-store purchases with e-commerce. Large amounts of information which have to be uploaded and downloaded. What impact is a data cap going to have on those businesses? We suggest it's going to be negative, and we're very concerned about that because, as everybody points out, small business is the engine of our economy. And our economy is sputtering at the moment, and anything which adds hundreds of dollars to monthly costs for small businesses is simply a burden which we should resist very vigorously. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Internet Essentials program. And just to say that it's always interesting to follow an industry spokesperson who paints a very, very rosy picture, and to wonder why it is that there is such an extraordinary disconnect between the wonderful programs that they outline and the sorts of consumer responses that my colleagues at Consumers Union are finding. And unfortunately, the situation with Internet Essentials is all too similar. A very different worldview from the provider of the idea and the people who actually are supposed to benefit from it. It's a good idea as far as it goes, but we are concerned with a number of different aspects. Number one, given the really substantial problem of the digital divide, why limit it to families with school-age children? And not only families with school-age children, but only families who qualify for the free lunch program. In discussions with our high school interns, they tell us that only a small percentage of their school population actually qualifies for the free lunch, and yet the schools find that significant numbers of students need assistance. But what about low-income seniors? What about low-income people living on their own? Families without children who need internet services and who are unable to afford them or for whom they're just not available. We hear from our colleagues in other states that there are significant barriers to taking advantage of Internet Essentials. It's already a program which is targeted at a very limited population, and the population within that limited number is already further limited by barriers which Comcast places in front of applicants. And the fact that this program that they talk a lot about to regulators and to the press has such a low participation rate in the target population really raises questions about their follow-through. It's very easy, it's great to announce a good program with fanfare and to brag about it to regulators. It's a lot harder to sustain the program and to make it really attractive to the people that it should be benefiting. And so the explanation and the actual real-world experience just does not jibe. And unfortunately, when we look at Comcast performance with other mergers in other jurisdictions and with other programs, we see too stark of a difference between what they promise that they will deliver and what they actually deliver when the rubber hits the road. So we believe that there are significant problems here, and we believe that simply conditioning the merger is not going to solve our concerns based on the experience we see in other jurisdictions and with earlier mergers. Here in New York, we have the advantage of being able to see how Comcast actually performs in the real world after other merger conditions and in other jurisdictions, and we believe that their performance raises real concerns, and we think that once the record is fully established in this proceeding, that it will not support a finding that this merger is in the public interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Byron. Our next speaker is Mark Malaspina, President of Computers for Youth. Mr. Malaspina oversees the nationwide program of innovation and implementation for Computers for Youth, including the organization's school-based programs to help low-income families adopt and use broadband effectively to support their children's educational success.
Good evening. We appreciate the opportunity to contribute our insight as the New York State Public Service Commission evaluates the potential merger of Comcast and Time Warner Cable. CFY does not take an official position for or against the potential merger of Comcast and Time Warner Cable. Instead, the purpose of our testimony is to focus on a very important merger consideration. How exactly would Comcast operationalize its commitment to provide essential low-cost broadband service to low-income families in the Time Warner Cable service area in New York State? In its existing service areas, Comcast operates the Internet Essentials program, which provides eligible low-income families with the opportunity to obtain low-cost broadband service and a refurbished computer. We believe that Internet Essentials has strong potential to benefit low-income families, but we recommend 3 important improvements to Internet Essentials if it is rolled out in the Time Warner Cable service area. First, to implement innovative outreach strategies involving schools and teachers. Second, to avoid enrollment obstacles. And third, to support continued enrollment by the families. Before discussing these recommendations, I'd like to provide some background about CFY's experience in helping low-income families adopt broadband service. Founded 15 years ago, CFY helps low-income children succeed academically by enabling their families and teachers to leverage the power of digital learning and personalized instruction and driving student self-directed learning. We have directly served more than 60,000 students in high-poverty schools across the country, involving schools also across the 5 boroughs of New York City. Our approach has 2 components. First of all, we provide students and their families with home learning technology and hands-on training in using technology to support student learning. After receiving training, families receive title to home learning centers, which are refurbished laptops or desktops, pre-imaged with Microsoft Office and educational software across all subject areas. We also provide families with information about broadband enrollment, including details of any available broadband discount programs. Secondly, we provide teachers with professional development workshops and consulting to help them implement blended learning practices that engage students effectively in the classroom and extend learning to the home. We also inform teachers about the broadband sign-up process so that they can motivate and encourage families to enroll. Based on our experience, CFY was chosen as a lead program partner for 2 large federally funded initiatives designed to increase and sustain home broadband adoption among low-income families in New York City from 2010 to 2013. Through these programs, CFY served a total of more than 27,000 families across more than 80 high-poverty schools in all 5 boroughs. The programs were funded primarily by the U.S. Department of Commerce and operated by the New York City Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications and the New York City Department of Education. Through our rolling survey work with families prior to program implementation each year, we found that approximately 50% of families in these schools did not have home broadband before they received the program. This lack of home broadband was a serious issue both for the affected families and for the entire school community. In order to drive broadband adoption among these families, CFY implemented our standard program components for families and teachers. We also implemented innovative discounted broadband programs with 2 local broadband providers, Time Warner Cable and Cablevision. We negotiated the best terms we could with each provider and memorialized those terms in a signed agreement with each provider, in which the provider committed to offer the discount for the life of the federally funded initiatives and to ensure a 5-year discount for all families that enrolled. We set up a comprehensive system to enable families to sign up for the broadband discounts through an online system, and we provided multilingual staff support to help families move through the entire enrollment process all the way from initial application to installation. More than 86% of the New York City families who initially did not have home broadband prior to the program successfully subscribed to home broadband after our program implementation. Some of the families enrolled in these discount broadband programs and others enrolled in market rate broadband programs, either with these providers or other providers. We believe we have gained some important insight into the challenges and solutions of driving broadband adoption among low-income families. We believe that Comcast Internet Essentials programs is a promising initiative, but we have 3 program recommendations based on our experience in New York City and other regions. First, to implement innovative outreach strategies involving schools and teachers. In our experience, schools and teachers are very important agents of change in driving broadband adoption among low-income families. Families generally have a good level of trust in schools and individual teachers. Moreover, school leadership understands the importance of broadband for their students' learning, and teachers are highly motivated to serve as partners in the family broadband adoption process so that they can adopt internet-based instructional strategies that extend learning beyond the limited classroom time. We found that teachers were essential partners for us in encouraging families to attend our workshops and enroll in broadband, and we attribute much of our program success to the fact that we work closely with schools and teachers in implementing the program. Based on this experience, we encourage Comcast to explore ways in which they can coordinate with schools and teachers in supporting low-income families. Strategies could include A, sponsoring school-based workshops for families to learn how they can support their children's learning and understand the benefits of enrollment, and B, providing teachers in Comcast service areas with Internet Essentials information that they can provide to those families who do not have broadband at home. Our second recommendation is to avoid enrollment obstacles. Through our work in New York City, we believe that it is important to consider 3 important obstacles that could face New York State families who seek to enroll in Internet Essentials. One very important obstacle is home language. Many of the adults of the families we served were native speakers of languages other than English and had limited English ability. And we found these families needed significant hands-on multi-language support in order to move successfully through the application and enrollment process. It will be critical for Internet Essentials to fully support families with a range of home languages, not just Spanish, in order to meet the needs of families in New York State. A second obstacle is ineligibility based on recent service. Our understanding is that Internet Essentials is not open to families who have subscribed to Comcast Internet service within the last 90 days. Our agreement with Time Warner Cable did not contain this restriction, and we think the restriction would create unnecessary obstacles for families. We recommend that the unrestricted approach that we negotiated with Time Warner Cable be considered for the Internet Essentials program as well. A third obstacle is ineligibility based on prior arrears. Our understanding is that Internet Essentials is not open to families with an overdue Comcast bill or unreturned equipment. Although we fully understand the motivation behind this policy, we recommend that these rules be reconsidered based on our experience with Cablevision and Time Warner Cable. Per our agreement with Cablevision did not permit families to enroll in the discount program if they had any previous bill that was 45 days past due. We found that this rule posed a very significant obstacle to enrollment, as many families were either unable to pay off the arrears, or other families seemed to lose trust in the entire program as they came to view the entire discount program as a ruse to get them to pay up past debts. On the other hand, Time Warner Cable agreed to a more accommodating approach in which families could enroll even if they had a past due bill based on services or unreturned equipment of up to $300. Moreover, Time Warner Cable fully forgave any past due bill of up to $300. This policy posed substantially less of an obstacle to families in the Cablevision program, and it built the families' confidence that the program was not a debt collection vehicle in disguise. Third, our third recommendation is to support continued enrollment. It is important that low-income families are supported not only in adopting discounted broadband, but also in continuing to be enrolled in discounted broadband over time. In other words, the measurement of program success should be total adoption over time, initial adoption plus retention, not just initial adoption. One important issue related to continued enrollment is residential mobility. Because rates of residential mobility among low-income families are often high, it is important that families receive support and guidance on retaining discounted broadband services if they move. The broadband providers with whom we worked in New York City did not have defined protocols for supporting families who moved, and often we had to support families to request discounted service in the new location without going through the entire eligibility review process all over again. Based on our experience, we recommend that the Internet Essentials program incorporate effective protocols for supporting low-income families if such protocols are not already in place. A second important issue related to continued enrollment is ineligibility based on modified service. We know that a portion of families who initially enrolled in the Cablevision and Time Warner Cable discount programs upgraded their service, e.g. paying market rates for faster speeds, and then later decided to go back to the discount program when their economic circumstances changed. It was very important for families to have this flexibility without becoming ineligible for the discount program. We therefore recommend that the following language in the Internet Essentials terms and conditions be reviewed and potentially modified, as it appears to indicate that families who upgrade their service may be rendered ineligible for Internet Essentials going forward. Quote, program participation also may be terminated if the covered service is upgraded, altered, or changed by you for any reason. End of quote. To summarize, we are passionate believers in the power of technology to support learning, and we believe that Comcast Internet Essentials program offers tremendous potential to support low-income families. Thank you for the opportunity to share our thoughts about how the Internet Essentials program could be even better if it were to roll out in Time Warner Cable's current service area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malaspina. And our final speaker tonight is Michael Santorelli. Mr. Santorelli is a director of the Advanced Communications Law and Policy Institute at New York Law School, where he also serves as an adjunct professor affiliated with the school's Institute for Information Law and Policy. As an ACLP director, Mr. Santorelli oversees the program's many research and writing efforts, a major component of which involves the examination of the array of broadband and technology policy issues impacting New York City and New York State.
Thank you, Judge, and Chair Zibelman, Commissioner Berman, Mr. Hume, Mr. McGowan. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and first and foremost, I appreciate the Commission leading by example on its energy efficiency initiatives with the conditions in here, so thank you for that.
Mr. Santorelli, I was going to say, given the lateness of the hour and our appreciation you're all here, if you all want to get casual and then take off your jackets, we won't mind, including the folks up here.
I'll lead the way.
So let's lead by example.
Okay. Anybody still got their suit coat on? It's just being stiff.
So you're already getting us to change.
But thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this forum. I'm really honored to be here to contribute to these very important discussions. Before I start, I just wanted to note up front that I'm here in my individual capacity as someone who's spent much of the last decade studying these issues involved in these discussions, and someone who's benefited immensely from the wisdom of just a broad array of stakeholders, public policymakers, et cetera, in the public, not-for-profit, and private sectors. And I'm also here as a lifelong resident of New York. And I also wanted to note up front, for what it's worth, is that New York Law School has been supported by a wide range of firms in the technology space, firms, individuals, foundations that have over the years included firms like Microsoft, Google, Comcast, Time Warner, foundations like Ford, MacArthur, Mozilla, Rockefeller. So I just want to put that out there for whatever it's worth. But my comments here today are my own. Broadband is really critical to New York City and New York State, so much so that I just wanted to acknowledge the mayor's counsel, Maya Wiley, who's in the audience, who's focused on these issues, is really doing some interesting work, spearheading some inquiries here in the city around broadband. The critical nature of broadband, I think, it increasingly goes without saying, because it has the potential to positively impact every person who uses it, every senior citizen, every person with disability, every student, every parent, every teacher. It also has the ability to transform every sector and every institution that it touches. And that's what makes it such a powerful and unique technology, that it has the ability to fundamentally reorient entire sectors and level the playing field for users. A few years ago, our program at the school issued a report that assessed the impact of broadband on New York. In that paper, we examined the broad array of benefits that high-speed internet access is delivering or is poised to deliver in key parts of the New York economy and in key communities. The analysis included, in the paper, included data and analysis that tracked a growing mountain of data that have emerged in recent years, supporting the basic conclusion that broadband, when effectively harnessed, has a range of measurable and unmeasurable impacts on users, many of which differ from community to community and from sector to sector. For older adults, for example, broadband is a connector that makes seniors, especially those who are isolated, feel more relevant and connected. For people with disabilities, it enables a universe of accessible content and tools that facilitate a range of new opportunities. For students, it delivers more targeted learning opportunities, connects parents with teachers, and in a growing number of instances, leads to better outcomes. And for residents and businesses in rural communities, broadband, that portion of New York that's above the Bronx, broadband also serves as a connector to resources that might not immediately be available, and as a vehicle for delivering critical healthcare and education services. And the list of benefits and impacts goes on and spans every sector, every community, every institution in the state. And as a result, public awareness of these benefits is increasing in kind as more and more people go online and use their connections to meet their individual needs. And from a public policy standpoint, the emergence of broadband as an impactful and versatile tool has become central to short-term and long-term economic development planning. All of its many uses and benefits work in concert with efforts to position the state as a leader in technological innovation, be it in producing semiconductors, conducting cutting-edge scientific research, or serving as a hub for high-tech startups. But realizing the many possibilities of broadband is incredibly hard work. These efforts are bigger than one company or one merger. To get to where we as a state, as a community need to be, requires concerted, collaborative action to figure out the best, most sustainable way forward. To these ends, Governor Cuomo in particular is to be commended for his vision and his leadership on these issues. His administration has been extremely proactive in not only setting goals, but also deploying a diverse array of programs and initiatives that constitute an all-of-the-above strategy for bolstering broadband throughout the state. His administration, for example, has committed tens of millions of dollars in funding, more than any state in the country, to seed public-private partnerships to support deploying broadband to areas of the state that remain unserved. The governor has launched an ambitious program, Startup New York, to lure new businesses to the state. Robust availability of broadband is increasingly essential to those efforts. And the state is poised to vote in the fall on a smart schools initiative, a bond initiative that promises to, among many other things, modernize technology infrastructure in schools across the state. And through agencies like Empire State Development, Broadband Program Office, the state has emerged as a true leader in developing and implementing effective technology-neutral strategies that are tailored to work for the hugely diverse array of communities and geographies and demographics in the state. So in short, progress is being made on all fronts. Gaps in availability are being reduced. The broadband adoption rate is slowly inching up. Startups and other technology-focused businesses are choosing New York as their home. But challenges certainly remain. Tens of thousands of households in the state remain unserved or underserved. Many of these households are difficult to reach, making them uneconomic to serve in the absence of some sort of public funding element, like the Connect New York grant. There are also challenges associated with fostering continued innovation and competition among all the firms in the broadband ecosystem, and especially those providing internet access service via cable, fiber, DSL, fixed wireless, mobile, satellite. Each of these platforms has played a key role in bringing broadband to some part of the state, and in all likelihood, they will continue to play key roles in bringing broadband to certain parts of the state. And there are also enormous challenges related to promoting continued adoption of broadband and ensuring that users have the skills needed to put their connections and their broadband-enabled devices to meaningful uses. All of this should serve as the foundation for what we think of as the public interest in the context of discussions about broadband in New York. The public interest here revolves around the ability of all stakeholders to align resources in every sector and in every community around shared goals for broadband connectivity. The key question to ask then of any proposed transaction or program or initiative is whether it will make us better off, whether it is worthwhile to shake up the status quo in an effort to overcome barriers that might be impeding further progress. So as a general notion, if the actions of a particular entity clash with these ideals, then it's fair to say that they are not acting in the public interest. But if they do things or commit to doing things that address these many challenges, then we should say that they are acting in the public interest. In the context of this particular transaction, and any major transaction for that matter, it's very tempting and very easy to be cynical about perceived motives or possible outcomes. It's also tempting to look at this proposal through a very broad lens when, in fact, we, the public of New York, need to look at this from the perspective of whether this transaction, or again, any transaction or program or initiative, will help to realize our goals, New York's goals for broadband. And so it's critical that we keep all this in perspective. It's sometimes tempting to look at this merger as a microcosm or a proxy for all the other big macro issues that are being debated at the FCC and elsewhere. And certainly those debates and their outcomes will impact every firm throughout the ecosystem, including the ones at issue here today, as well as consumers throughout the country. But those battles are best fought in other forums because mergers are just not the best way to make lasting policy. But nevertheless, this process that we're involved in here today affords many opportunities for us, the public, to ask some tough questions about whether the proposed transaction will operate in our interest and will make us as a state better off. Unfortunately, there's no formula that exists to provide us with a definitive answer one way or the other. We can't just plug in a bunch of data and have it spit out a result. But there are a lot of relevant inquiries that can and should be made, and the answers to which should inform this particular discussion. Foremost among these is whether the transaction would contribute to helping us as a state realize core goals for broadband connectivity on both the supply side and the demand side. Are proposed commitments of resources and efforts to leverage scale enough to assist in improving existing networks throughout the state, in building out new ones, and in helping to close stubborn digital divides? There's much data in the public filings and the public statements and elsewhere to suggest that the transaction would, in fact, yield more benefits than costs on these points. Another question to ask is how this transaction might impact businesses of all sizes. Will they and their employees be better off? Will the transaction bolster state efforts like Startup New York, help to fuel more startups, and attract new businesses to the state? Again, there's evidence to suggest that it would likely support efforts to improve network infrastructure for businesses of all sizes. And what about here in New York City? If the transaction were to go through, would the newly formed entity be able to catalyze further innovation? Would it help to spur business creation? Would it help to increase investment in the city's increasingly essential startup space? Would proposed actions align with state and local goals for supporting continued growth in key sectors and otherwise diversifying economic activity? Again, there's evidence to suggest that it will, in fact, yield better outcomes than continuing forward with the status quo. New York City, in particular, is well positioned to benefit from possible leveraging of existing assets here, like NBC and Comcast's venture funding arm, all of which could assist the newly formed company, in immediately establishing it as a partner in helping New York City and potentially other cities throughout the state cement its reputation as a hub for high-tech innovation. And finally, on an issue that's near and dear to me, is broadband adoption. What about broadband adoption? Is internet essential all it's cracked up to be? We've heard some varying perspectives here, but leaving aside criticisms about alleged shortcomings in programs, eligibility criteria, and other aspects, there's substantial evidence to suggest that the program is effective in connecting unconnected low-income community members and working to ensure that they are digitally ready. 1 million new internet users is an impressive number. 1 million people who are online who probably would not be online but for the program. And having studied and written about the program in isolation and as part of sort of analyses of other adoption programs, I truly believe that it could have an enormous impact in New York, and especially here in New York City, which is home to the largest school district in the nation. And what makes it even more exciting, and Mark touched on this in his testimony, is that New York City and New York State is already home to just a broad array of really great digital literacy groups, like Computers for Youth, Computers for Children, who I think testified at a previous hearing, so many others here in the city and the state. And I imagine that all those groups would be very eager to partner with Comcast via Internet Essentials or some other program in some other way to come up with some really creative solutions to these really endemic, entrenched, complex problems on the demand side. So in closing, I wanted to reiterate the importance of keeping these discussions in proper context. Doing so allows for more merits-based evaluations that revolve around a relatively simple metric of whether transaction or any effort implicating broadband in New York will or will not, on the whole, help to move the needle on core public policy goals for this vital technology. Thank you again for the opportunity to contribute, and I look forward to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Santorelli. That was our final speaker in the Information Forum. We now have an opportunity for the commissioners and members of the department staff to ask any questions of the speakers they may have. If there is a question directed to you, you can probably just use one of these microphones at the stands here. But first, I believe Chair Zibelman had a comment.
Just a comment. First of all, I wanted to thank everybody for attending this evening, the speakers as well as members of the audience.
Any of you.
There you go.
All their microphones are, they mute you.
They mute us?
Everybody mumbled. And you had microphones.
All of them are low, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Everybody.
Well, I apologize for that. We will endeavor to speak
Turn on your
closer to the
microphone.
microphone. Is that okay?
Better.
So first of all, I want to thank the speakers, Comcast, for joining us tonight, and all the members of the public. We, on behalf of the commission, this is a very critical component of our deliberation process. It's important for us to hear from the public. We take your comments very seriously, both your oral comments tonight and any written comments that you want to supplement and enter into the record. So again, thank you for being here. And as you know, this process, it will involve public hearings. We've had 3 so far. And in addition, there will be an opportunity to write formal comments, and as well, our staff itself will be writing comments, and all of which will be eventually considered by the commission to make a determination on the proposed transaction. So again, thank you for being here. I have, if I can, Judge,
Yes, go ahead.
I have just a question I'd like to ask, actually, to the four of you who testified in terms of the merger. And it seems to me that a little bit of what I've heard, and I just, for my own clarification, is that everybody agrees that, and I suspect Comcast too agrees, that one of the outcomes we want to get out of this, and certainly from the Commission's perspective, an important outcome, is around universal access to broadband. And when I say universal access, it's not just the ability to connect, it's the ability to connect at a price one can afford, and that secondarily that it doesn't act as a limiting factor, as Ms. Lerner, you were suggesting, for others who might want to do alternatives. So the question I had, and I thought it was an interesting comment, is the issue in front of us now one where, as I believe the gentleman suggested, we can condition it in order to achieve the public interest, or is it something that you're suggesting that because of the scale of the company, Ms. Lerner, that you can't see any conditions, and I'm sorry, I'm going to...
Ms. Derakhshani.
Derakhshani, the same thing. Can you conceive of conditions that the Commission could impose to address your concerns? Or are you suggesting that the sheer scale should be considered by the Commission as a threat to getting these concerns addressed? Which then leads me to my next question, is since the situation is here now that we're not getting the access we want, what's the alternative route that you would suggest would be better for the state?
Right. Well, first, we have two...
You want to hit that button?
Yes, I do.
Right.
Thank you. We have two concerns. The first is indeed the scale. The scale, from a public point of view, creates an entity that has so much inherent power, market power, financial power, political power, that it is basically unregulatable and not truly accountable either to its customers or to the governmental entities with which it enters into contracts, and the entities which would then, like the PSC, have oversight responsibility over its conduct. The kinds of penalties, for instance, that you would be able to assess for the conduct here in New York would be barely a pinprick for an entity of the size of a Comcast if you found that it had violated conditions. And the second point that I tried to make is that I think we can look at Comcast's behavior and promises that it has not fulfilled or either violated in relation to other mergers to raise significant concerns that, yes, I'm sure that there are a host of conditions which we could suggest, which the Commission and its staff would be able to recommend, but we have very little confidence that Comcast will actually honor those promises, and we believe that its conduct in relation to earlier mergers shows that it will violate conditions when it feels it's to its advantage, and that the remedies available to government are not going to restrain its anti-competitive, self-interested conduct.
So Consumers Union would maintain that any benefits are not enough to outweigh the harms that are likely to result from this deal, and we would maintain that it should be blocked. There are a few points I want to touch on. First is that determining what's in the public interest is not just limited to a discussion of broadband, obviously a very important part of the discussion, but things such as the consumer experience, I think, play just as important a role. And customer service and the consumer experience, we've heard a lot about the state of that in New York, and there are a lot of concerns that it's not going to get any better. So, oftentimes I've noticed that the two companies point to network investment as an indication of how things might get better. But again, we have yet to see that any of these benefits will really pass along to consumers, or that they'll reach all consumers. And the ultimate goal should be to be able to reach consumers in all areas, including rural areas where there may not be as much of an incentive to build out, for example. So we're also concerned about perhaps a bit of an overstatement of the level of competition. There's still a lot of issues, but the broader public interest standard, I think, should seriously consider the consumer's perspective in addition to many of the things that were mentioned today.
The CFY is not taking a position on the merger as a whole. We would suggest that if the balance of the pros and the cons are evaluated, that, as we said, the Internet Essentials program, I think, has potential. I do think that this would be an opportunity for Comcast, together with other parties, to revisit some aspects of Internet Essentials, taking into account, for instance, the language issues in New York City, taking into account some of the learnings that we had from programs with Time Warner Cable itself, and make the Internet Essentials program a much, much stronger program. Again, we think it has tremendous potential, and as Michael said, I think could be transformative if done in fully the correct way. So that would be, we recognize that Internet Essentials is not the only issue here, but for us it would be an important one to consider in its details before moving forward.
So, to your question about the notion of universality of broadband in the state, just a couple of points. First, I think most, if not all, cable franchises already have build-out requirements in them, so I think that those would transfer with them. Sorry, I'm very soft-spoken, so pardon me if you don't hear me. But in terms of the sort of broader notion of universality of broadband in the state, generally, as I mentioned in my testimony, and respectfully, as I'm sure you all are very aware of, it's an exceedingly complex, and respectfully, it goes beyond this particular proceeding. I've had the opportunity to serve on the New York State Broadband Task Force for the last 6 or 8 months or so, and that's really given me a really unique window into the very many challenges that face so many communities upstate, the North Country, Southern Tier, et cetera. And so figuring out solutions for these areas where broadband is not available, or where areas that are unserved, doesn't lend itself to a one-size-fits-all solution. As I mentioned in my testimony, it's a more sort of all-of-the-above strategy. Some areas might be amenable to cable, some might be more amenable to fixed wireless, which is an increasingly popular method of bringing broadband to certain areas that are especially geographically remote. The Connect New York program that I think has been mentioned, I mentioned and has been mentioned elsewhere, has also been very successful in seeding these partnerships and bringing a diverse array of stakeholders to the table to figure out exactly which communities need to be served and how to serve those communities in ways that are both economic and that reflect the unique topography and demographics of a particular area. So I'll just leave it at that.
I could see you were.
You could see me on the edge of my
Yeah.
seat, right? It's always a challenge when you've got 4 speakers who raise a lot of different issues and where to begin. So, I think to answer your question, you were talking about some of the challenges set before you and some of the issues that have been raised tonight about those who don't have access. And they don't have access because the facilities don't run by their door, or they don't have access because of affordability. We have, for those who were participating in the public forum in Albany last night, we talked a little bit about this same issue and talked about Comcast history of extending its network in adjacent Vermont was one of the examples that we gave. And it was in a partnership where the state had identified similar issues to what's being identified here tonight as part of the challenge in New York, at least part of the challenge in more rural New York, that some just don't have a choice running by their doorstep or by their farm, we heard about last evening, and how important it is to have those advanced services running by the door. So we have, as our normal business, extended our network, but also where there are those really remote areas that it is really difficult to justify a return on investment to extend the network. We have engaged in partnerships similar to the Connect New York partnership with the Vermont Telecom Authority, and that was able to bring our network to those more rural parts of Vermont. And we envision, as we said last night, that there would be an interest on our part in participating in the Connect New York program to bring more people in New York online. But as far as adoption is concerned, we heard a lot this evening about the inadequacies of Internet Essentials. And it's, it feels from our perspective like it's a no good deed goes unpunished moment, because the reality is no other company is stepping up to the plate like Comcast has stepped up to the plate to offer a program that can try to connect people to the internet who, but for this program, don't have the means to be connected. And we talked last night about the fact that we have modified the program because some said initially, this isn't good enough. This isn't really going to meet the needs of individuals who need to be connected. So what do I mean by that? When we launched the program, it was only for the free school lunch program students, and it was only in public school. And when we talked to individuals, like the individuals you've heard this evening, when we talked to policymakers, they said, wouldn't it be great if you didn't limit it just to those who are in public school and those who are in the free school lunch program? We then expanded it to the reduced school lunch program. And then we had instances where there were Provision 2 schools, where 70% of the people in that school are in free or reduced school lunch, but the other 30% aren't. But they, for record-keeping ease, if you will, consider the entire school to be eligible for the free school lunch program. We expanded our Internet Essentials program to meet that. Moreover, when we launched the program, it was 1.5 megabits. We heard from educators, and we heard from parents, and we heard from policymakers. While we appreciate Comcast's efforts to connect those who aren't connected, 1.5 megabits is inadequate. We doubled the speed. When we had it at 3 megabits per second, we also heard from people saying, for some of these videos that we're looking to download, educational videos, even 3 megabits isn't fast enough. We brought the speed up to 5 megabits. So every step along the way, whether it's speed, whether it's those who are eligible, or for that matter, public school, we opened it up to parochial, we opened it up to charter. We had people from cyber schools say, what about us? We opened it to them. We had home schools say, what about us? We opened it to them. So we have changed this program throughout. Where are we today? So we estimate that about 10% of those who are eligible sign up. If you compare that to our regular internet service, we've been at this now for almost 20 years, and we have about 40% of individuals we pass sign up for that service. Are we interested in partnering with more organizations to expand the reach of the program? Yes.
Thank you. I have no. Do you two want to have a question?
I had one question, sort of as a follow-up to some of the comments. Do any of you believe that the commission could treat the sheer size of the company that would be created by the combination of Comcast and Time Warner as contrary to the public interest if that combination is not in violation of any laws governing the combination of companies, antitrust laws?
Well, you're governing the combination, I can't because with the coughing and, I'm sorry.
If any laws governing the combination of companies through merger?
So I think the question was, what is there a reason that this could be against the public interest given the sheer size of the company? And I think that the answer is yes, and I touched on this a little bit in my testimony earlier, in that a large company with a huge national presence may have less of an incentive to address local New Yorkers' concerns, for example. And that's something that I think is likely to result. So.
Could you restate the question? Okay. What I was trying to say is, is there a basis for the commission to treat the sheer size of the combined company as being contrary to the public interest if there are no laws that dictate that the size of the company or the combination of these companies is illegal or otherwise improper?
In essence, not an antitrust violation?
Not an antitrust.
Okay. I think that this commission has a separate charge in terms of how it would define public interest from a classic antitrust pro-competition definition. And I think that we have a regulatory framework, and I think we have public expectations in terms of the ability to hold companies accountable and to be able to perform effective oversight, as I think I said in response to the chair's question. And I believe that once, when you have a company with the kind of market power and actual just economic size of the combined Time Warner Comcast, that the ability of any one state to effectively provide oversight in the public interest becomes limited. And the ability of the state to require remedies which will meaningfully govern the conduct of that large and national of an entity becomes very limited. And that has, I think, a very significant negative impact on public interest.
Thank you. Yes, would you like to? Everybody doesn't have to answer if they don't want to, but you may.
I would answer the question by saying that no, I don't think that the commission has a basis for that inquiry. The scope of the inquiry here before the commission is New York State, and as has been outlined in the filings and elsewhere, the company, the merged entities don't compete head-to-head in New York, so it's sort of swapping out one for the other. And as for any potential antitrust violations, anti-competitive behavior, there are ample laws on the books here in New York and at the federal level to protect against anything that might happen subsequently post-merger.
You know, where it feels like the conversation is going is that things will get so big in New York that we should be afraid of this. Yeah. And the reality is, though, that the proposal before us is for Comcast to step into the shoes of Time Warner. So then the analysis, I think, should reflect upon what do we get from Time Warner today and what could we get? And I think for every product, whether you're talking about video, you're talking about voice, you're talking about broadband, there are better things that you get from Comcast than you can get from Time Warner. So what do I mean by that? Time Warner has said that it will convert to all digital. We have said we will accelerate that schedule to convert to all digital. Time Warner's top speed right now offered is 100 megabits per second. Comcast is 500 megabits. So the materials talk that we've submitted and that are available for the public to review, we talk about those differences. One thing, though, that we haven't really spent much time talking about is that benefit of scale. So people talk about a number of things tonight. We'd like those advanced services, and we'd like for you to also do more for people who are at the lower end of the economic spectrum. It takes significant resources to be able to do that. And New Yorkers will have the benefit not only of being able to essentially plug into that network that's all around them, that's more advanced than the network that exists in New York today, but you also think with respect to that reliability, you have the ability with a merger of this kind for New Yorkers to not only plug into that advanced network, but when it comes to times of crisis, whether it's hurricane or other natural disasters, having that network that is nearby for redundancy, as well as the resources to restore services, meaning people in trucks coming to restore services in a situation like a Hurricane Sandy. If you have a company with scale, you have the ability to lean on those kinds of resources. At the end of the day, we've spent $85 billion investing in our network over the last 15 years. It's not an inexpensive game to play to be able to reinvest in the network and keep meeting consumer demand. The last 5 years, it's $27 billion. Last year was $6 billion. So you need a company that's going to have the resources to be able to deliver what consumers want. And we heard a lot of "I want" tonight. And you need a company not only with the resources to do that, but the expertise. Thank you.
Thank you.